My father used to say that business was a language, and my brother, Tom, was a native speaker. On the other hand, was fluent in languages that didn't put food on the table: Japanese, Old Norse, Aramaic. To him, they were curiosities, like my collection of antique maps, hand-sewed, my strange habit of reading dictionaries for fun. I was Kate, the linguistics professor, the academic, the one who lived in a world of theory and dust, while Tom, his son, his successor, conquered the real world of profit margins and shipping manifests. It was a role I had accepted, a box I had lived in for 40 years. It was comfortable, in a way. It asked nothing of me but to be quiet, to be smart in ways that didn't matter, and to applaud Tom's every success. I never realized that a box, even a comfortable one, is still a cage until the day my brother tried to bury our father's legacy in a grave of lies, and he used my life's work, the very language I loved, as his shovel. It all started, as these things so often do, with a death. Our father's passing was sudden, a heart attack that ripped through our family like a fault line, exposing all the cracks that had been papered over for decades. After the funeral, after the casseroles and the hushed condolences, Tom called an emergency family meeting. He'd been running Miller Imports, our family's import-export business, for the last 5 years, a role he'd slid into with the easy entitlement of a golden child. The meeting was in the old wood-paneled boardroom downtown, a room that smelled of my father's cigars and old leather. My mother was there, her face a mask of practiced grief, and my Uncle Ben, my father's younger brother and a minority shareholder, sat, twisting his hands, looking perpetually worried. Tom stood at the head of the table, in our father's chair. He had the same broad shoulders, the same confident set to his jaw, but his eyes held a cold, calculating glint that my father's never had. He let the silence hang, a showman working his audience. Finally, he sighed, a heavy theatrical sound. He said, "I'm afraid I have terrible news. It's about the Nakamura contract." A cold dread trickled down my spine. The Nakamura deal was everything. It was a massive, exclusive contract with a Japanese manufacturing giant that my father had spent a decade cultivating. It was the bedrock of our company, the reason Miller Imports was a respected name, and not just another struggling local business. Tom slid a document onto the center of the polished mahogany table. "The contract is void," he announced, his voice laced with false regret. "I had our lawyers go over it, and there's a termination clause we all missed. It seems there was a translation error." He looked directly at me, a flicker of a smirk playing on his lips, a very subtle one. "In the addendum regarding shipping tariffs," he explained, using a lot of big words that were meant to sound impressive and confusing, that this error created a loophole for Nakamura Corp to pull out without penalty, which they had. The financial repercussions were catastrophic: millions in lost revenue, penalties for unfulfilled orders. He painted a grim picture of bankruptcy, of everything our father built turning to dust. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "A translation error. Tom, that's impossible. Dad and Mr. Nakamura had that contract translated and vetted by 3 separate firms, I remember." What was the phrase? What was the error? Tom gave me that look, the one I'd known my whole life, a mixture of pity and condescension. "Kate," he said, his voice soft, as if speaking to a child, "this is highly complex, multi-layered corporate Japanese. It's not the kind of thing you'd understand from your academic textbooks. We're talking about nuanced legalese, not haikus." The room was silent. My mother nodded along, her eyes full of admiration for her son, the brave captain trying to steer the ship through a hurricane. Uncle Ben just looked defeated. My voice, my expertise, was dismissed with a wave of his hand. He was the native speaker of business. I was just the hobbyist. But then he delivered the killing blow, the true purpose of this entire performance. "There is one way out," he said, his posture shifting from beleaguered son to savvy executive. "A competitor, Sterling Logistics, has been trying to buy us out for years. I've spoken with them. They're willing to make a generous offer, absorb our assets, and take on our staff. It would mean selling the company, but it's the only way to avoid total ruin. I've already negotiated the terms." He would, of course, be given a lucrative senior management position and a substantial payout for brokering the deal. He was not just the captain of the sinking ship, he was the hero who had miraculously found the only lifeboat, a lifeboat with his name already on it. And just like that, he had done it. He had taken our grief and twisted it into a crisis only he could solve. He had used the death of our father as a smokescreen for a corporate coup, and he had used my own field of expertise, my very identity, as the weapon against me, ensuring no one would ever think to question him. He told the family, my academic Japanese wasn't good enough to understand. He didn't know, or perhaps had forgotten in his monumental arrogance, that the CEO of Nakamura Corp., Kenji Tanaka, wasn't just a business partner. He was my former university mentor, the man who had shaped my entire career. Tom thought the language was his shield. He was about to find out it was my sword. The days that followed were a blur of suffocating grief and a quiet, simmering rage. The family, what was left of it, clung to Tom like he was a messiah. He was decisive. He was strong. He was making the tough calls. My mother would call me, her voice a fragile whisper, telling me how proud my father would be of Tom for saving the family. Each word was a small, sharp sting. They were mourning the company, but I was mourning something more. I was mourning the fact that the man my father had entrusted with his legacy was the very one setting it on fire, and that the family was handing him the gasoline. I felt utterly, completely alone. I'd retreat to my small apartment, a quiet sanctuary filled with books on etymology and syntax, a space that had always felt like home, but now it felt like a cage of my own making. Tom was right, wasn't he? I lived in a world of theory. What good were my books against his boardroom machinations? He wielded power, and I wielded useless facts. My protests, my questions, were seen as the naive ramblings of an academic who didn't understand the real world. It was a narrative my family had accepted for decades, and in the raw aftermath of my father's death, it had hardened into gospel. My mind kept replaying moments from our past, like a film reel stuck on a loop of tiny cumulative betrayals. I remembered being 9 years old, standing in the living room with my report card clutched in my hand. Straight A's. I had even won the school spelling bee. I handed it to my father, my chest puffed with pride. He glanced at it, gave my head a pat, and said, "That's nice, dear, very smart." Later that afternoon, Tom came home with a C+ on a math test he had previously been failing. My father threw him on his shoulders, laughing, and took him out for a new 10-speed bike. You see, my father had boomed to my mother. He's got grit, he's a fighter. My A's were expected, unremarkable. Tom's mediocrity was a triumph. Then there was the time I won a scholarship to study abroad in Japan for a year. It was the single most exciting moment of my young life. I told my parents at dinner, my voice buzzing with the news. My father smiled that distant, pleasant smile of his. Japan, huh? All that way to study. What is it again? Old writings? He shook his head, a chuckle in his voice. I don't get it, but you seem to like it. Just don't forget where the real world is. He then turned to Tom, who was a freshman in business school. Now Tom, he's learning things that'll build something. He's the one who'll take over one day. It wasn't malicious. In his mind, he was just stating a fact. Tom was the heir. I was the ornament. My passion was a quaint hobby, like needlepoint or collecting stamps. It had no value in the world he understood, the world of Miller Imports. It was in Japan that I met Professor Kenji Tanaka. He was a visiting lecturer at my university in Kyoto, a brilliant, formidable scholar of classical Japanese literature, who also happened to be a consultant for his family's burgeoning manufacturing company. He was the first person who didn't look at my love for language as a quirk. He saw it as a discipline, a science, an art. We would spend hours in his dusty office, debating the nuances of a single character in a 1,000-year-old poem, the air thick with the smell of old paper and green tea. He saw a rigor in my mind that my own family had never recognized. He'd push me, challenge me. Language is not a collection of rules, Kate-san, he would say, his eyes sharp and kind. It is the architecture of thought. To master it is to master the very structure of truth. When I left Japan, he gave me a parting gift, a beautiful fountain pen. Do not let anyone convince you that your words are powerless, he told me. For years that pen had sat on my desk, a symbol of a time when I had felt truly seen. Now sitting in my silent apartment, that memory felt like a cruel joke. My words were powerless. Tom had proved it. He had woven a fiction so convincing that no one, not even my own mother, would listen to my truth. The sale of the company was moving at a dizzying speed. Lawyers were involved. Papers were being drawn up. Tom was the center of a whirlwind of activity, and I was on the outside, a ghost in my own family's story. The despair was a physical weight. It made it hard to breathe, hard to think. I was drowning. Then my phone rang. It was my best friend Marcus. He was a corporate lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man, who had been my rock since college. He was the only person who had ever called my family out on their dynamic, a fact that made him deeply unpopular at our holiday dinners. Kate, I heard about your dad. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice warm with genuine sympathy. The dam broke. I told him everything. The meeting, the translation error, Tom's heroic solution. The way everyone was looking at him like he was a savior. I poured out all the frustration, the humiliation, the suffocating sense of injustice. I expected him to offer condolences, to tell me to hang in there. But Marcus was a lawyer. He heard facts, not just feelings. He was quiet for a long moment when I finished. Then he said, Kate, that stinks. That stinks to high heaven. What do you mean? I asked, wiping my eyes. Think about it, he said, his voice shifting from friendly to analytical. A multi-million-dollar, multi-year international contract, the lifeblood of your company, is voided by a single translation error, an error that 3 separate legal firms supposedly missed. No, that doesn't happen. These things are scrutinized down to the last comma. There are letters of intent, memorandums of understanding, bilingual parallel texts. It's a fortress of legal protection. For it to be undone by one oopsies in translation, it's a fantasy. His words cut through the fog of my grief. He was right. It wasn't just unfair, it was illogical. And another thing, he continued. Since when does your brother Tom, the guy who got a D in high school Spanish, read Japanese? let alone complex legal Japanese. Did he show you the clause? Did he show you the original text and the supposed mistranslation? No, I whispered. He just said it was too complex for me. Of course he did, Marcus snorted. That's a bully's tactic, not a businessman's. He's hiding something, Kate. He's counting on you being too grief-stricken and too intimidated to call his bluff. A seed of doubt, cold and hard, began to sprout in the wasteland of my despair. All those years of being told my work was frivolous, that my knowledge was esoteric and useless, all those dismissive pats on the head. It had worked. I had internalized it so completely that I hadn't even thought to question my brother's lie, a lie built entirely within my own field of expertise. As if on cue, a text message buzzed on my phone. It was from Tom. I read it aloud to Marcus. Hey sis, just wanted to let you know the initial paperwork for the Sterling sale is done. You won't have to worry about a thing. I'll make sure you get a little something from the proceeds, enough to buy a few more of your dusty old books. The smiley face was the final twisting turn of the knife. The condescension, so casual, so absolute. He wasn't just selling our father's company, he was patting me on the head for letting him do it. Something inside me snapped. It was a clean, quiet break. The grief didn't vanish, but it crystallized. The despair didn't disappear, but it transmuted into something cold and hard and clear, resolve. Marcus, I said, my voice devoid of the tears it had held just moments before. You're right, he's bluffing. So what are you going to do? He asked. I looked at the fountain pen on my desk, the gift from Professor Tanaka. Language is the architecture of truth. My brother had built a house of lies. I was going to tear it down, brick by brick, using the very tools he had taught me to despise. It wasn't about revenge, not at first. It was about the truth. It was about my father's legacy. But standing there, staring at that smug little smiley face on my phone, I felt a new thought emerge, unbidden and sharp. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. The plan formed in my mind with a clarity that felt almost foreign. It was a plan born not of emotion, but of pure, cold logic, the kind of logic I used when deconstructing a dead language. Tom's entire scheme rested on a single, arrogant assumption that the source of his lie, Nakamura Corp. In Tokyo, was a world away. Inaccessible and unknowable to me. He saw an ocean between his lie and the truth. I saw a 10-hour flight. I didn't tell my mother or Seb would give Tom time to prepare, to build his walls higher. I only told Marcus. He listened to my idea, a low whistle escaping his lips. Fly to Tokyo, on a hunch. It's more than a hunch, Marcus. It's a hypothesis, I corrected him, the professor in me taking over. The premise is that Tom is lying. The only way to test the hypothesis is to go to the primary source material. I love it when you talk nerdy, he chuckled. Okay, professor. So you fly to Tokyo, you knock on the door of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and say what? Hi, can I see my dad's old contract? They'll laugh you out of the building. I have an in, I said quietly. The CEO, Kenji Tanaka. He was my mentor at Kyoto University. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. You're kidding me. The CEO of Nakamura Corp. Was your professor. He's the one who taught me that the devil isn't just in the details. He's in the translations. Kate, Marcus said, his voice now serious, filled with a newfound respect. This changes everything. This isn't a long shot anymore, this is leverage. You get me hard proof, a statement, a certified copy of the real contract, and I can stop that sale dead in its tracks. I'll be your legal counsel on standby. Just text me. day or night. That night I booked a flight. I used my own money, the savings from my university salary that my family always seemed to pity me for. The act itself felt like a rebellion. I packed a small bag, a change of clothes, a laptop, and a folder containing a copy of the fraudulent clause Tom had shown the family. It was a terrible blurry photo he'd condescended to text me when I'd first asked for details. At the time it felt like an insult. The journey was a strange purgatory. Seated in the quiet, humming cabin of the airplane, soaring miles above the earth, I felt disconnected from everything. The grief for my father was a dull, constant ache. The anger at Tom was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. But underneath it all, a new feeling was stirring. Purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting. I was acting, but the self-doubt was a relentless passenger. What if I was wrong? What if there really was some bizarre, complex error, and Tom was, for once, telling the truth? I'd be flying halfway across the world to make a fool of myself. Worse, what if Professor Tanaka didn't remember me? It had been 15 years. He was the CEO of a global powerhouse now. I was just a former student, a face from a distant past. It was the old narrative creeping back in. You're not important, your world is small. I landed at Narita International Airport in a daze of jet lag and anxiety. The sheer overwhelming reality of Tokyo, the crush of people, the symphony of unfamiliar sounds, the neon glow against the night sky, should have been intimidating. Instead, it was invigorating. This was a world built on the language I understood. I wasn't an outsider here. I checked into a small, sterile business hotel in Shinjuku. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop. I found the corporate website for Nakamura Corp. There he was, Tanaka Kenji, president and CEO. The photo was older, more serious, the kindness in his eyes tempered by the weight of his position. But it was him. I took a deep breath and composed an email. I used my old university email address, hoping it might trigger a memory. I kept it simple, professional. I introduced myself as a former student from his Kyoto University days, and mentioned that I was in Tokyo. I explained that I was the daughter of Richard Miller, of Miller Imports, and that a matter of some urgency had arisen regarding our company's contract, following my father's recent passing. I asked humbly if he might spare a few moments of his time. I hit send, my heart hammering against my ribs. The chance of a reply felt infinitesimal. I must have fallen into an exhausted sleep, because I was woken by the ping of a new email on my laptop. It was from the office of the CEO. I clicked it open, my breath catching in my throat. The message was from his executive assistant, a polite, formal confirmation. Mr. Tanaka remembered me well. He would be delighted to see me. Could I be at the Nakamura Tower tomorrow at 10 in the morning? The next morning, I stood before the Nakamura Tower, a gleaming skyscraper of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. It was a monument to the real world my father had always talked about. I felt small, a linguistics professor about to walk into the lion's den. I clutched the folder with the blurry photo of the forged clause like a talisman. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent and swift. I was escorted into a vast, minimalist boardroom with a panoramic view of the entire city. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window. The table was a single, massive piece of polished black granite that could have seated 30 people. I sat down, my reflection a tiny, insignificant figure in the gleaming surface. The door opened, and he walked in. Kenji Tanaka looked every bit the powerful CEO in his immaculate dark suit. He was older, his hair now streaked with silver, but he moved with the same quiet grace. I remembered. He stopped, looked at me, and a slow smile spread across his face, a smile that reached his eyes. He bowed slightly. "Kate-san," he said, his voice the same as I remembered, a calm, gentle baritone. He spoke in Japanese. "It has been far too long. I was so sorry to hear of your father's passing. He was a man of great honor." The warmth of his greeting, the use of my name, the respect in his tone, it was enough to shatter the last of my anxiety. I bowed in return, my voice a little unsteady. "Tanaka-sensei, thank you so much for seeing me. I know you are a busy man." I called him sensei, teacher out of instinct, a sign of deep respect. He waved it off, sitting opposite me. "For my most brilliant student, I will always have time." Your paper on the semiotics of the Manishu was to this day one of the finest I have ever supervised. Tears pricked my eyes. He remembered my work. I took a deep breath and laid out the situation. I explained Tom's claim, the translation error, the voided contract, the forced sale of our company. I tried to keep my voice even, to present it as a professional query, but the tremor of betrayal was impossible to hide completely. Finally, I pushed the folder across the table. "This is the clause my brother claims has nullified the agreement." He picked up the printout of the blurry photo. He read it, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was silent for a full minute. Then he looked up at me, his expression unreadable. For a terrifying second, I thought I had been wrong. He pressed a button on a sleek console on the table. "Yuki-san," he said into a speaker, "please bring me the original Miller Imports Master Agreement from the archives, the fully executed copy." A few minutes later, his assistant entered with a heavy bound document, embossed with the logos of both our companies. It felt sacred. Professor Tanaka opened it, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. He found the section on tariffs and shipping addendums. He laid it flat on the table, next to the blurry photo I had brought. He pointed to a space on the original document. "Here is the corresponding section in the authentic agreement," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He read it aloud in perfect, clear Japanese, then translated it into English. It was standard, boilerplate language about tariff adjustments, mutually agreed upon. There was nothing about termination, nothing about voiding the contract. He then tapped the photo from my brother. "This clause," he said, his voice now like ice, "does not exist in our agreement. It has never existed. This is a fabrication." Relief washed over me so intensely. My knees felt weak. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong. "Furthermore," he continued, pointing to the official red stamp at the bottom of the original page, "this is our corporate Hanko seal. It is a registered legally binding instrument, as important as a signature in your country. The image on your brother's document, the stroke weight is incorrect. The balance is wrong. It is a crude forgery. A child could see it." He looked at me, his kind eyes now filled with a fierce protective anger on my behalf. "Your brother has not found a loophole, Kate-san. He has committed fraud." The word hung in the air between us, stark and brutal. "Fraud. What do you need from me?" he asked, his tone shifting from scholar to CEO. My voice when I found it was steady. "I need proof, something I can take back with me, something legally indisputable." "An affidavit," he said, nodding. A sworn statement, notarized, testifying to the authenticity of our contract and the fraudulent nature of your brother's document. He explained the process of creating a kosei shusho, a notarized deed in Japan, executed by a public notary. It was a powerful legal instrument, almost unassailable in court. My legal team will prepare it immediately. It will be my pleasure to sign it. No one dishonors my partners, and no one, absolutely no one, uses the beauty of my language to build a throne of lies. As I left that tower, the notarized affidavit, a heavy, powerful promise in my briefcase, I felt like a different person. I had walked in as Kate, the grieving daughter, the dismissed academic. I walked out as Kate, the woman with the truth. Tom had built his entire plan on the idea that I was weak and my knowledge was worthless. He had no idea that my useless knowledge had just given me access to the one man on Earth who could burn his entire world to the ground. The flight back from Tokyo was the opposite of the journey out. There was no anxiety, no suffocating self-doubt. There was only a cold, crystalline certainty. I had the truth in my bag, sealed and sworn in both English and Japanese. It was a bomb, and I was going to choose the time and place of its detonation with surgical precision. I landed in Portland and didn't go home. I didn't call my mother. My first and only stop was Marcus's office. I walked in, set the heavy Barabin document on his desk and said, "Is this hard enough proof for you?" Marcus, ever the lawyer, read every single word. He examined the notary's seal, the signature, the official stamps. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. "Kate, this isn't just proof. This is a kill shot, a Japanese kosei shusho. The level of authority this carries is immense. Your brother isn't just going to lose this fight, he's going to be eviscerated." We spent the next 2 hours mapping out the strategy. The final board meeting to approve the sale to Sterling Logistics was in 3 days. That was our stage. "We don't show our hand yet," Marcus advised, tapping the affidavit. We let him walk right into the trap. We let him feel confident. We let him believe he's won. That evening, following Marcus's script, I sent a single carefully worded email. The recipients were Tom, my mother, Uncle Ben, and the family company's lawyer. A man named Peterson, who had been my father's golf buddy and was now firmly in Tom's pocket. The subject line was simple: query regarding the Nakamura contract. The body of the email was even simpler. "Dear all, ahead of the board meeting to finalize the sale, I have been conducting my own due diligence regarding the termination of the Nakamura contract. I have recently procured a certified and notarized copy of the original master agreement directly from Nakamura Corp. In Tokyo for my review. I look forward to discussing its contents and reconciling our records at the meeting. Sincerely, Kate Miller." I hit send, and I waited. It took less than 5 minutes for the first grenade to go off. My phone lit up with Tom's name. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. I ignored it. Then came the texts, a frantic cascade of digital panic. "Kate, what the hell is this? Where did you get that? What are you doing? You need to stop this right now. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to jeopardize the Sterling deal. This is not your area of expertise. You are going to embarrass yourself and this family." Each message was more desperate than the last. The condescension was still there, but it was thinner now, stretched taut over a foundation of pure terror. He was a bully who had just realized his victim might have learned how to fight back. He had mistaken my silence for surrender, my grief for weakness. The quiet academic was suddenly a variable he hadn't accounted for, and it was driving him insane. Next came the call from my mother. I knew it was coming. Tom was deploying his most reliable weapon. Her guilt, I let her leave a voicemail. Her voice was trembling, laced with tears. Kate, honey, it's your mother. Tom called me. He's so worried, he's working so hard to save what's left of your father's business. And he said you're trying to interfere. Please, darling, don't do this. Tom knows best. He always has. You're upsetting the family at such a difficult time. I listened to the message, my heart aching, not for her pleas, but for her blindness. She saw a son trying to save them. She couldn't see the wolf selling off the flock for his own gain. My resolve, which had wavered for a fraction of a second at the sound of her voice, hardened back into steel. This wasn't just about Tom anymore. It was about breaking a cycle that had been strangling us for decades. I saved the voicemail. It was another piece of evidence. Evidence of the manipulation, of the role everyone was forced to play. The golden child, the worried mother, and the difficult daughter. The performance was about to be cancelled. The panic from Tom continued to escalate. He tried calling Marcus, who with great professional pleasure, informed him that he could not discuss his client's affairs. He tried emailing Peterson the lawyer, ceasing me on a message that was a transparent attempt to regain control. Peterson, it read. Please inform my sister that any documents she has procured through unofficial back channels are legally inadmissible and potentially fraudulent themselves. We have the official company records, that is what matters. It was a bluff, and we both knew it. I replied to all. With one sentence, I look forward to comparing your official's records with the notarized affidavit from CEO Kenji Tanaka. The silence that followed was more telling than any of his frantic texts. He knew the name. He knew exactly who Tanaka was, and in that moment, he must have realized that the one detail he had forgotten, the one small academic's piece of my life he had never bothered to value, was about to be his undoing. The trap was set. All he had to do was walk into it. The day before the board meeting, I made one final move. It was a gamble, but one I felt I needed to take. I called my Uncle Ben. He was a quiet man, always living in my father's considerable shadow, and then in Tom's. He held a 15% stake in the company, not enough to be powerful, but enough to be a kingmaker in a close vote. He was decent, and I was counting on that decency. Uncle Ben, I said, my voice calm. It's Kate. I'm calling about the meeting tomorrow. Oh, Kate, he sighed, his voice heavy with weariness. Your mother called. She said you're having a hard time with the sale. The sale is based on a lie, I said simply. There was no emotion, no accusation, just a statement of fact. I then walked him through it. I didn't show him the affidavit, but I told him what it was and what it said. I told him about my relationship with CEO Tanaka. I just laid the facts out, like a proof for a theorem. I'm not asking you to take a side, I concluded. I just wanted you to have the full picture before you walk into that room. I think Dad would have wanted you to. He was silent for a long time. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. Your father, he was very proud of you. You know, he said finally, his voice thick. He didn't have the words for it. He didn't understand your world, but he was proud. Tom was the one who spoke his language. I know, Uncle Ben, I said softly. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up, not knowing if I had gotten through to him, but I had planted the seed. That evening, there was a loud, insistent knock on my apartment door. I knew who it was. I opened it to find Tom standing there, his face pale, his usual arrogance completely gone, replaced by a raw, desperate fear. He looked smaller. Somehow, Kate, he began, trying for a tone of weary reconciliation. Can I come in? We need to talk. I didn't move from the doorway. There's nothing to talk about, Tom. We'll do our talking at the board meeting. His composure cracked. Don't do this, he pleaded, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The numbers were bad, worse than Dad ever told anyone. The sterling deal, it was the only way out. I was trying to protect the family. It was an incredible performance. He was trying to reframe his fraud as a noble act of sacrifice. He was appealing to our shared grief, our family bond, the very thing he had used to manipulate everyone else. Okay, he said, his eyes darting around, as if he was afraid of being overheard. Hey, maybe I embellished the situation with the Nakamura contract. I bent the truth a little, but I did it for us, to get us a better deal, to save Dad's legacy. I just stared at him. I said nothing. My silence was a mirror, and in it, he saw the ugliness of his own lies reflected back at him. It unnerved him more than any screaming match ever could have. He took his final, desperate shot. Look, he said, stepping closer. The sterling deal is worth millions. When the sale goes through, I'll give you a bigger cut. A much bigger cut. Whatever you want, we can call it a consultant's fee for your due diligence. No one has to know. We can keep it in the family. He was trying to buy my silence. He was trying to make me a co-conspirator. He assumed my price was just a matter of negotiation, that my principles, like his, were for sale. He saw my quietness, my academic nature, as a lack of spine. He couldn't comprehend that it was the source of my strength. The family isn't a criminal conspiracy, Tom, I said, my voice as cold and clear as a winter morning. I'll see you at 10 o'clock. I closed the door on his shocked face. The power had shifted. He just didn't realize how completely until he walked into that boardroom the next day. The boardroom felt like a stage set for the final act of a tragedy. The air was thick with tension. My mother was there, seated next to Tom, her hand resting on his arm in a show of solidarity. She shot me a look of deep disappointment, the look of a mother whose child was willfully misbehaving. Tom, for his part, had managed to paste his mask of confidence back on, but his eyes were tight, and he wouldn't look at me. Uncle Ben sat at the far end of the table, his face impassive, his gaze fixed on the polished mahogany. Peterson, the lawyer, shuffled his papers, looking uncomfortable. Tom began the meeting. He launched into his well-rehearsed speech about the dire financial situation, the unexpected and unfortunate termination of the Nakamura contract, and the lifeline offered by Sterling Logistics. He spoke with the smooth, practiced cadence of a man who has told a lie so many times he almost believes it himself. He moved to the final agenda item. And so, he concluded, his voice resonating with false gravitas, I call for a final vote to approve the sale of Miller Imports to Sterling Logistics. All in favor. He raised his own hand, and my mother's shot up immediately beside his. He looked pointedly at Uncle Ben, then at me, a flicker of his old smugness returning. He thought he still had this. He thought my little protest would amount to nothing. Before we vote, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. It didn't sound like my own. It was calm, steady, and amplified by the room's acoustics. Every head turned towards me. I believe there is a document that needs to be entered into the record. I stood up and walked to the head of the table. Then I placed the affidavit, still in its folder, directly in front of Peterson. This is a sworn and notarized affidavit from Kenji Tanaka, the Chief Executive Officer of Nakamura Corporation, executed in Tokyo 3 days ago. Peterson opened the folder, his eyes widening as he saw the official seals and ribbons. Tom started to speak. a blustering sound of protest, but I kept going, my voice never rising. The affidavit attests that the contract between Miller Imports and Nakamura Corp is, and has always been, in good standing. It attests that there is no termination clause, and that no translation error exists. It attests that the business relationship is strong, and in fact, more profitable than ever. I then opened my own folder and took out several documents. A clean copy of the fraudulent clause Tom had invented, a certified translation of the real clause from the authentic contract, and a side-by-side photographic comparison of Nakamura Corp's real Hanko seal and the forgery Tom had used. I slid a set in front of everyone. My mother, Tom, Uncle Ben, and Peterson, and finally, I said, my eyes locking on Tom's for the first time. The affidavit attests that this document, I tapped the forgery, is a fraudulent instrument and that Nakamura Corp is prepared to cooperate fully in any legal proceedings regarding its creation and use. The room went absolutely still. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Peterson's face had gone the color of ash as he read the affidavit. My mother stared at the papers in front of her, her face a canvas of utter confusion. She looked from the forgery to Tom, then to me, as if the words made no sense. Tom's facade finally, completely, shattered. "This is a trick," he sputtered, his voice cracking. She colluded with them. She went behind our backs. This is corporate espionage. It was then that Uncle Ben spoke, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through Tom's panicked accusations. He looked at his nephew, not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. "Tom, is this true? Did you lie to us?" Tom opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked around the room, seeking an ally, a friendly face, but found none. He had built his power on a foundation of lies, and I had just kicked out the cornerstone. The entire structure came crashing down around him. Peterson, the lawyer, cleared his throat, his professional survival instincts kicking in. "Tom," he said, his voice cold and formal, no longer addressing a friend's son but a massive legal liability. "Given the contents of this affidavit, we need to discuss your fiduciary duty to this company. We need to discuss fraud. We need to discuss your immediate resignation." The sale was dead. The company wasn't bankrupt. It was thriving. My father's legacy wasn't in ashes. It was secure. My brother wasn't the family's savior. He was a common criminal who had been caught. He had tried to use a language he didn't understand to swindle his own family, and I had used that same language to deliver the unvarnished, irrefutable truth. The vindication was not loud. It was silent, absolute, and complete. In the end, Tom's fall was as swift as his attempted coup. He resigned in disgrace, threatened with legal action, not just from the company, but potentially from Nakamura Corp if he made any trouble. The Sterling Logistics deal evaporated overnight. The story in the local business community was that Tom had stepped down for personal reasons, but the truth has a way of seeping out. His reputation as a business prodigy was ruined. Uncle Ben, with my full support as a shareholder, stepped in as the interim president. He was a different kind of leader than my father or brother, quieter, more thoughtful, more collaborative. He brought in a professional management team, and for the first time, the company was run not as a family fiefdom but as a modern business. He started taking Japanese lessons. My mother tried, in her own way, to piece the family back together. There were tearful phone calls, pleas for forgiveness, for letting bygones be bygones for the sake of the family. She wanted a world where Tom's crime could be swept under the rug, where we could all sit down for a holiday dinner and pretend nothing had happened. But I couldn't. I told her I loved her, and that I could have a relationship with her, but not one that included Tom, and not one that was built on a foundation of denial. The old roles were broken. I would not be the quiet scapegoat ever again. It was a hard boundary, the first one I had ever truly set with her, and while it was painful, it was also liberating. Some things that are broken can't be fixed, they can only be left behind. Family isn't a suicide pact where you have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I didn't want a role in the company, that was never my goal. My victory wasn't about gaining power in their world, it was about validating my own. It was about proving that my knowledge, my passion, the very core of who I am, was not useless. It was powerful. A few weeks later, I was back in my office at the university, the familiar scent of old books and brewing tea filling the air. It felt like home again, but a home I had returned to as a different person. A package arrived for me from Japan. Inside, nestled in silk paper, was a rare first edition text on the evolution of Japanese script. It was a priceless, beautiful thing. Tucked inside was a note, written on Professor Tanaka's personal stationery, with a familiar fountain pen. It simply said, "Kate-san, language is about truth. I am proud of you for using it to find yours. Your teacher, Tanaka Kenji." I held the book to my chest. My brother was fluent in the language of business, of profit and loss, but I was fluent in the language of truth. And in the end, that was the only one that mattered. For years, I let my family define my worth. I was the bookish one, the quiet one, the one who didn't live in the real world. I let them mistake my silence for weakness, and my passion for a silly hobby. My brother built a prison of lies around me, using my own life's work as the bars. He thought he was untouchable. But he forgot that a linguist knows that every word has a root, a source, and I just followed the words back to their source, and there, I found the truth. My revenge wasn't a loud, fiery explosion. It was quiet. It was precise. It was academic, and it was absolute. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have they ever dismissed your passion? The thing that makes you who you are, as something silly or worthless? I want to hear about it. Tell me your story in the comments below, because I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight to reclaim your own truth from the people who were supposed to support you, please consider subscribing. This is a community for those of us who found our strength in the quiet places, and you are not alone.